And what I want to talk about today is this scene. I don't know, who recognizes this scene? Hands up? Good. For the people that don't recognize this scene, it's in the first episode of Stranger Things, the successful Netflix series. There are 4 boys there playing Dungeons and Dragons. And as with a graph in an academic paper, a scene always has a purpose. A scene without a purpose to the greater story gets deleted. So should a graph, by the way. The purpose of this scene was to tell the audience, these 4 guys that are going to be the main focus of the show, they're a bunch of nerds. They're a bunch of total geeks. However, that was not what it meant to everyone. Because to me, it meant, that's me. I remember, I was that kid back in '92, playing in the basement with my friends, playing Dungeons and Dragons. A lot of Dungeons and Dragons. And I think other people here, maybe Sam, might have had the same recognition when they were playing that. So I recognize myself in that. Had you, at that moment, asked me how I would be 15 years later, I wouldn't have said something like this. Because this is how my science made the news. Look at that godly pose. So basically, I would have never guessed that would have happened. But if you Google image search, you get this. About how the smart waiters that we presented here 2 years ago, I don't know if people still remember, in the poster hall, it was hot, how the smart temperature sensing waiters made the news, or how escaping from Alcatraz made the science news. I would have never guessed that. And because so much of my research made the news, I started questioning, how does that work? So then, together with like the previous speaker, and 2 people that are actual scientists into the science of science communication, Jonica Smeets and Anneland Sandstad, we did a literature review on what is proven in science communication, what works to get on television. And one of the things, and the things I'm going to focus on today, is structure. Classically, everybody in journalism thought that for a newspaper article or a news item, you start with a message, you start with the bottom line, and then you go down into detail. Whereas in an academic article, you start with an introduction and background, which is mainly supposed to lose 90% of your audience, so that only the ones that are really invested in that topic will continue on, usually the reviewers. Then you go up with a lot of details to discourage those that don't get the mathematics behind your work, and then you provide them with the results. And so it's inverted, it's called the inverted pyramid, and this stems from a time where Huub was talking about, of newspaper journalists. Because newspaper journalists had to hand in their text to the editor, and the editor of a newspaper journal, of a newspaper, would have to be able to cut away the last paragraphs without having to read them. This is a necessity. This is not because this is the best way to bring news. And what we see more and more is that this is not used anymore in communicating science. Because, I'm sad to say, your science is not news. If your story that you publish could be published tomorrow, it's not news. It's background, it's information, it's stuff for talk shows, all of that, but it's not the news, because the news has a time limit. So you see that most science reporting is now done in the Saturday issues of newspapers or in television programs, and they don't use this structure. They don't need to be that attention grabbing. The structure they use is a narrative structure that they borrowed from movie making because it captivates audiences and makes sure they go throughout the entire story, which, by the way, is not what an academic article does. And the very basic 3X structure that you get in screenwriting 101 is you have some exposition, you get an inciting moment that kicks off the action, you get rising action, you get a crisis, the crisis gets resolved, and you get a relief and a reward. This 3X structure, in any Hollywood movie, you can point it out. And this keeps audiences captivating. So if you want audiences to follow along with your entire story, follow this structure. As a good nerd, it's now common, very common, to give an example. As one of the previous speakers said, it's a really good example. And we usually do that with Star Wars. However, Star Wars has been done over and over. There's somebody going on about like the hero's journey, so I'm going to do it with a different movie, which is also one of my favorites, so that helps. This movie starts with exposition. And I mean, if you remember the movie, like the first scene where they're digging up a raptor, it's part exposition, but the main exposition in this movie is when they encounter the first dinosaur. That, oh, this movie is about real dinosaurs. That's cool. But until this and then a few scenes later, it's still nice. We haven't had the exciting moment yet. The exciting moment that's gonna say shit's gonna hit the fan is when someone questions where the goat is. Yeah, you remember that, right? In a few milliseconds, a goat leg is gonna drop on the roof of that car. That starts off the action. And from that point on in this movie, what you get is that the action gets tenser, some sideline characters get sacrificed, and we end with a big crisis finale that both is the spectacle of the movie and at the same time resolves the plot. And then as a letdown, we do need that, we get like a letdown to let the emotion levels die, we just fly away into the sunset on a helicopter. That structure is important. Going back, and how you make that structure, and that's why I put this quote in, and that's also why I put Jurassic Park. Steven Spielberg, who made this movie, said, I was not good at making movies because I watched a lot of movies. So any film nerd that has a huge library and thinks I can make movies, no, you can't. You get good at making movies by making a lot of movies. So if you want to do narrative on your research, you don't get good by reading a lot of stuff. You get good by writing a lot of stuff. You get good by making narratives. And that gets me back to Dungeons and Dragons. Because the basic premise of the game of Dungeons and Dragons is not a game in the sense that one of these 4 guys is going to win it. There's 4 guys at a table, and I think I should emphasize that I would like there to be more girls at the table at some point. But then, yeah, really, it's just more fun, it adds more diversity in voices. There's 4 people on the table, and what they're doing is they're telling a story together, where one feeds on the other. And to be able to do that, and to be able to realize at the end of the evening, we told a nice story together, you need to understand story structure, you need to understand something about tension, but you also need to have empathy for the people on the table. Because it's going to be nice for everyone on the table if you understand what makes them tick. And only then can you tell a story together. I had 6 years of in-basement practice in telling stories together with diverse people. That is what made me good in turning my science into narrative-driven science. And if you now think, yeah, you got a point there, where do I start? Well, play Dungeons and Dragons, right? And I know this can be daunting because a Dungeons and Dragons rulebook is 300 pages and you need to get into a group and it's hard. But there's a lot of board games out there and a lot of other games out there that just start you into collaborative storytelling. Together, tell a story, and at the end of the evening, nobody has won, but you're all happier for telling stories together. It's sitting by the campfire 15,000 years later. Gloom is a very good example of that. Sam gave me yesterday, it's about killing off your family in the most dramatic, cool way, but apparently it tells really good stories. And if you come to the Pico screen in a few moments, instead of just having more info for you, what we're going to do is we're going to play this. There's a whole lot of role-playing games akin to Dungeons and Dragons that don't require you to read a 300-page book, but require you to read a 200-word pamphlet. The pamphlet has all the information to play the game. We'll be playing the game No Sleep tonight. It's really easy. Liv, Sam and I will be facilitating it. Come to the screen, enjoy telling a narrative together, and once you've done that a few times, think about the narrative in your research and how that narrative is going to be used to convince the audience, be it journalists, be it your family at home, what your research is about. Thank you very much.